Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a hero, you're not a noble, or a knight, or even a soldier anyone will bother to bury. You're a Scottish mercenary in the 100 Years' War, which sounds impressive until you realise that title just means foreign cannon fodder with a funny accent. You've traded your hunger in the Highlands for hunger in a swamp outside Paris, and the only thing you've earned is a festering blister where your boot used to be. The French don't trust you, the English want you dead, and your own commander can't pronounce your name. But don't worry, you won't be alive long enough for that to matter. Before you get dragged into a skirmish you won't understand, and almost certainly won't survive, do me one small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. And if you'd like more of these slow, sarcastic descents into historical despair, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You're not a man of means, you're not even a man of options. At best, you're a man with a name no one spells the same way twice, 5 working fingers on each hand, and a stomach that has learned how to fold in on itself politely. You were born in the Highlands, where the land is stingy and the weather is worse. Your father died in a cattle raid before your voice cracked. Your mother didn't last long after. Fever, famine, or just the quiet despair of a life lived entirely in smoke and mud. There's no coin to be earned, no food to be stored, and no peace to be had. Not from the English, not from the French, and certainly not from the neighbours, who'll gut you faster than they'll greet you if you so much as look at their goats wrong. You've swung a blade, though not for coin, for pride mostly, or because someone insulted someone else's cousin 4 generations back. Clan wars are a hobby where you're from, and honour is just another way of saying, I'd rather die in a ditch than apologise. You've fought in peat bogs, up crags, over chickens, and once inside a church during Mass. You've killed, or at least maimed, and you've been told that makes you a warrior. But in truth you're just poor. You eat when there's food, you shiver when there's wind, and you spend most days hoping you're too forgettable to be noticed by anyone with authority. So when the rumours start, whispers about pay, about travel, about a war that actually wants you, you listen. At first it sounds like a joke. The French are hiring Scots to help fight the English. Old alliance, they say. Brothers in faith, in arms, in mutual hatred of Englishmen. There's coin in it, gold even, regular pay, just for swinging a blade at the right uniform. A few sceptical laughs pass around the fire, but no one walks away. Because you've eaten boiled oats 4 nights in a row. Because your cousin was hanged last week for sheep theft. And because something in your gut, something hollow and aching, wants it to be true. The man who arrives a few days later doesn't look like a saviour. He's soft around the edges and smells like cloves and damp cloth, speaking French with a sprinkle of Latin and English, thick as treacle. He claims to represent Charles of France, though you doubt Charles has ever heard of your village. He talks about the Pope, about duty, about the divine right of kings and the righteous punishment of the English crown. He says words like chivalry and glory, with the same tone one might use for porridge or tunic, like they're items you can put on and wear into town. You nod like you understand. You don't. But then, you're not here to understand. You're here to get paid. He opens a pouch at his belt and lets the coin flash in the light. Real coin, not chipped pewter or bent copper. Actual silver, with the right kind of weight to it. You haven't seen that much money since your uncle married the laird's daughter and immediately drank himself to death. The recruiter says you'll get more once you reach France, more still after your first engagement, and a final bonus at the end of your term. No one asks how long that term is, or when the war is supposed to end. You're too busy doing the math in your head. How many coins to buy land or a cow, or just enough ale to forget where the rest of them went. You make your mark on a page you can't read, beside a name that might be yours if you tilt your head. So do half a dozen others, Farmhands, thieves, second sons with nothing to inherit and nowhere else to go. They issue you a weapon, sort of. A bent pike or a short sword with rust like dried blood near the hilt. Armour isn't mentioned. You're told to bring a warm cloak and boots that won't fall apart in the first rain. When you ask if there'll be horses, the recruiter laughs, like that's the funniest thing he's heard all month. Then he gives you your advance coin and moves on to the next desperate idiot in line. At night, you sit by the fire with the others, turning the coin over in your fingers. It's real. You bite it just to check. You wonder if it's cursed, or worse, if it's the last one you'll ever hold. No one talks much. Just quiet muttering, fidgeting, and the occasional prayer, spoken more out of habit than hope. You hear someone ask whether the French even like Scots. The answer, delivered without irony, is that they like us better than the English do. It's not reassuring. When the day comes to leave, you pack your things. That takes less time than it should. One tunic, one cloak, a bit of dried meat, and a prayer token you stole from a church wall 3 winters ago. You walk with your unit, if that's the word, toward the coast. It rains, because of course it does. Your boots squelch in the mud, and the wind cuts through your wool like it's trying to peel your skin. Someone behind you is already coughing, which feels like a bad omen. The recruiter rides ahead on a pony that refuses to look anyone in the eye. At the edge of the harbour, you see the ship. If you squint, it looks seaworthy. If you don't, it looks like a floating coffin. A low, ugly hull coated in gull droppings, tied up with ropes that appear older than the planks they're holding together. The sail droops like a wet blanket, and there's a smell you can't quite place, something between spoiled fish and wet rope left too long in a corner. You stop walking, not because you've changed your mind, there's no mind left to change, but because some small part of you wants to take this last moment and hold it. This is the last time your boots will touch Scottish soil, the last time the wind will smell like peat smoke and pine, the last time, maybe, that your name will matter to anyone at all. You turn your coin over one more time. It glints. It's heavy. It feels like something that matters. And that's the trick of it, really. That's the moment they get you. Because that coin in your hand, the one that made all this seem possible, is the last one you'll ever see. You won't be paid again. Not properly, not fairly, and not without blood on it. But it doesn't matter. You already signed, or scratched, or nodded. The details blur, but the outcome doesn't. You stare out at the water, vast and grey and whispering, and you take your first step toward the ship. You've never seen this much water in one place before. Not in dreams, not in stories, and certainly not in the highland lochs that pass for oceans where you come from. The sea is too big, too grey, too loud. It moves like it's breathing, slow, deep and heavy, as if the whole thing might rise up and swallow the ship just to prove a point. The vessel creaks like it's already tired of being afloat. Its boards groan with every shift of wind, and the sails flap without rhythm. You're not sure what's louder, the waves slapping the hull, or the sound of men praying under their breath. The ship is too small for the number of bodies packed into it. You were told this was a merchant vessel once, before the war gobbled up every ship that could hold a sword, and didn't already have holes in it. It smells like a barrel that's been filled with salt, fish guts, old piss and fear, all marinated in sunlight and sealed shut until now. There's no privacy, no bunks, just a damp deck below and a sloped hole beneath it, both crawling with rats, mould, and the occasional groan from someone too sick to stand. You find a corner, not because it's dry or warm, but because it's slightly less wet than the rest. And you sit with your knees drawn up, and your stomach already muttering threats. The French officer, who apparently ranks just above filth, stands on the top deck, barking orders you can't understand. Every so often he switches to broken English to insult you personally. He tells you not to lean too hard on the railings, because they're older than you and not nearly as sturdy. He tells you not to piss in the bilge, which is confusing because that's already where the piss seems to go. Most of all, he tells you not to die until you get to France. You'd laugh, but you're not sure your stomach can take the motion. The first day is bearable, if only because you're too frightened to move. The second day, the vomiting begins. You'd heard of seasickness, distant rumours told by men with more time than sense, but nothing prepared you for the reality. It hits hard like a boot to the gut, from inside your own ribs. The ship tilts and rolls, and your insides slosh along with it. You vomit into the sea, then into a bucket, then into your own hands. Eventually, you vomit into your own boots, which you're still wearing. You don't even remember doing it. The motion of the boat dulls your brain into a pulpy, sloshing mess. The others are no better. One man hasn't stopped groaning since the tide turned yesterday. Another has gone completely silent, staring into the void like it owes him something. A third keeps muttering prayers in a dialect so thick it might not be Gaelic anymore. You try to focus on anything else, the ropes overhead, the clouds, the sound of the water, but the smell keeps dragging you back. It's not just vomit, it's sweat and rot, and the stale, bitter stink of unwashed men stacked like meat in a smokehouse that forgot the fire. Someone defecates too close to the food stores. The officers are furious. The rats are thrilled. The noblemen don't have these problems, of course. They stay above deck, drinking wine and telling stories about campaigns they probably didn't fight in. They have dry boots, furs and flasks full of something that doesn't taste like brine and regret. They look down on you like you're already dead. And maybe you are. One of them tosses a heel of bread overboard, just to watch a rat dive after it. You wonder if you could catch the rat, cook it, eat it. But you can't keep broth down, let alone fur. The lice arrive by day 4, not because they weren't there before, but because by then you've stopped caring about anything except scratching. They nest in your tunic, in your beard, in places that were never meant to be bitten. You share them, of course, everyone does, trading them like curses passed by skin and sleep. You try to drown a few in a bucket. They float. You take that personally. The water runs out halfway through the crossing. You're told to drink sparingly, which is difficult, considering you've already been licking the inside of your own mouth for moisture. The food is a salted biscuit, hard enough to chip teeth, and a bucket of something that may once have been stew. You try not to ask what's floating in it. You eat it anyway, then throw it up, then eat again. You stop trying to understand the cycle. There's a storm, of course, because nothing involving you can be straightforward. It comes on suddenly, turning the sky into a writhing bruise and the sea into a thing with claws. The ship lurches and groans, boards flexing like ribs in a coughing fit. Men scream, buckets tumble, a rat bites someone in the panic. You tie yourself to a rope and pray, not for safety, but just to avoid being pitched into the black. The waves don't want you, not yet. You survive somehow. You think you slept through part of it, or blacked out, or died briefly. There's no real difference anymore. By the time land is sighted, you can't feel your legs. Your tongue tastes like rot, and your eyes sting from the salt. You stand up too quickly, and nearly collapse into the slop bucket. One of the crew points toward the horizon, and mutters something that sounds like France. You squint. It doesn't look like salvation. It looks like a damp, grey mistake rising from the waves. You try to feel something, relief, fear, anything at all, but your stomach twists and you vomit seawater down your tunic instead. The harbour is worse than you expected. Slippery wood planks, crooked beams, shouting men in a dozen accents you don't understand. You disembark without ceremony, like a sack of grain being tossed ashore. The dockhand who catches you wrinkles his nose and mutters something about lice. The French officer waves a scroll and tells you not to wander. You couldn't if you wanted to. Your knees buckle on contact with solid earth, and you stagger like a drunk into the nearest crate. Someone offers you bread. Someone else immediately slaps it from your hand. Mould, they say, or poison, or both. It's not clear whether they're joking. The rain starts as you gather your things, what's left of them, and shuffle toward the waiting camp. You are soaked to the bone in minutes. Your boots squelch. Your cloak smells like urine and brine and sickness. You taste bile every time you swallow. You cough, and something inside you feels loose, like a lung or a part of your soul. This is France. Welcome. The mercenary camp is a slouching sprawl of canvas and timber, set just beyond the ruins of what used to be a village. You know it used to be one because the stone walls are still blackened with soot, and something that might once have been a chapel now houses rats and broken carts. Smoke still rises from the rubble in thin, lazy ribbons, like the place is reluctant to let go of the memory of burning. A few villagers linger on the outskirts, gaunt, suspicious, clutching what little they didn't lose. One spits as you pass. You don't blame him. The camp stinks before you even reach it. Not the sharp rot of death, that comes later, but the thick stew of men who haven't bathed in weeks, layered over by spoiled rations. Wet canvas, unwashed clothes, and whatever's leaking out of the latrine trench that no one's properly dug. The mud is ankle deep in places and seems to suck at your boots, like it's hoping to keep you here permanently. You hear barking, shouting, and the unmistakable sound of steel hitting wood, not in training, but in frustration. A man is hammering a helmet onto another man's head. You keep walking. You don't understand a word anyone is saying. Not really. The French bark orders in a language that sounds like slurred sneezing, and the few who speak a kind of English speak it the way a butcher speaks Latin, confidently and with no regard for accuracy. They point a lot. They yell. They use hand gestures that may or may not be insults. You respond in kind, mostly with shrugs and blank stares. Occasionally, someone laughs when you misinterpret something. You laugh with them because you assume it's safer than not. You try asking where to report in, but the man you ask looks at you like you've coughed in his wine. He waves vaguely toward a cluster of tents, then mutters something in French that includes the word barbare. You've heard it before. Barbarian. That's what you are to them. Not a brother in arms, not a fellow soldier, just a hairy outsider with too many consonants in your name and no idea how to lace your gambeson properly. Another soldier, probably Flemish, calls you écossais with the kind of tone one might use for fungus or wound. You get your gear from a man who looks like he's been dead for several days but hasn't realised it yet. His skin is grey, his hands shake, and his armour creaks when he moves as though it resents being part of this mess. He tosses you a pike, blunt at the tip and stained near the grip. It's too long for you and too short for anything useful. When you ask if there's a shield, he blinks at you like you've requested a silk pillow. You're told to make do. That seems to be the unofficial motto of the entire war. Sleeping arrangements are explained with a series of grunts and a gesture toward the far end of the camp, where the mud looks especially deep and the tents especially absent. You're not issued a blanket, or straw, or even a name tag. You find a bare patch of dirt near a collapsed wagon and sit down before your legs give out entirely. Your knees crack like ice splitting on a river, and your back feels like someone's been hammering your spine in your sleep, which they might have, for all you know. Your new neighbours don't introduce themselves. One is already asleep, wrapped in something that might have been a horse blanket. Another is sharpening a knife without looking up. A third is picking lice out of his sleeve and flicking them into the fire with a kind of lazy resignation you find oddly comforting. No one seems to want to talk. You don't blame them. You're not even sure what you'd say. Hello, I've recently made the worst decision of my life. Doesn't seem like much of an icebreaker. At mealtime, if you can call it that, you line up behind a battered cauldron that looks like it's been salvaged from a collapsed smithy. The man ladling out stew is missing 2 fingers and half a nose. He grunts when you approach and slops a grey, lumpy liquid into your wooden bowl. It smells like boiled onions and regret. You try to identify what's floating in it and give up. You eat anyway, because there's nothing else, and because the hunger gnawing at your ribs is louder than your sense of caution. Later, you will regret that. The French soldiers don't eat with you. They have their own tents, their own fires, and their own stew that smells suspiciously like actual food. They look cleaner too. Not clean, just less visibly plagued. One of them tosses you a look like you're a stray dog. Another spits and says something about mercenary. You think he meant it to sting. It doesn't. You've already heard worse from your own clan. And anyway, you're beginning to suspect the French hate each other nearly as much as they hate you. It's oddly unifying, in a miserable sort of way. Night comes quickly and without ceremony. The wind cuts through the camp, like it's trying to trim the fat off your bones. You wrap yourself in your cloak and try to sleep, but the ground is hard. The cold is worse, and the sounds of coughing, farting, weeping, and quiet praying bleed into each other like a choir of the damned. Somewhere nearby, someone retches. Somewhere farther, someone snores like they're drowning in their own phlegm. You close your eyes and try to imagine something better. A fire, a bed, a meal with taste. But the images slip away as fast as they come, replaced by the sharp pressure of your pike digging into your side, and the realization that no one here cares if you live through the night. No one comes to check on you. No one counts your name, or your gear, or even the fact that you arrived. You were marched in, handed a weapon, and left to rot like old vegetables at the bottom of a cart. It dawns on you slowly but thoroughly. You are expendable. Not just unwanted, but entirely replaceable. A warm body to plug into a battlefield until it cools. They didn't bring you here to help. They brought you here to die more conveniently. You stare up at the canvas sky, colourless and frayed, and wonder how many men have done this before you, slept in this exact mud, under this same sky, with the same pit in their stomachs, and the same realisation heavy on their chest. You don't know their names. No one does. But you can still feel them here, in the stink, in the silence, in the way your breath curls upward and disappears into the dark, unremarked and unremembered. Training begins with shouting. It doesn't stop. Your unit is herded together at dawn by a man on a horse that looks almost as tired as he does. The night is French, which means you don't understand a word he's saying, but that doesn't stop him from screaming at you like he expects the sheer force of his contempt to translate across language lines. He's wearing a dented breastplate, a fur cloak stained with something dark, and a look that suggests he's seen more men die than sleep. His left eye twitches when he speaks. His right leg doesn't bend properly. You get the distinct impression that this man was meant to be put out to pasture a decade ago and just never got the memo. He introduces himself with a name no one can pronounce, then launches into a speech about discipline, valour, and God's will. At least that's the gist, based on tone and gesturing. You're handed a practice pole, which is just a stick with a bit of iron strapped to one end. It's not balanced, it's not sharp, it's not remotely useful for anything except bludgeoning people by accident, which turns out to be exactly what happens. You're told to form ranks, then immediately screamed at when your formation doesn't look like whatever imaginary diagram the knight is carrying around in his half-rotted skull. You try to copy the man next to you. He's holding his pike backward. The French soldiers training with you, if with is the right word, seem just as confused. Their tactics involve precise formations, timed manoeuvres, and Latin commands barked out like spells. Your unit, by contrast, fights the way Highlanders always have, in a furious muddy sprint with lots of screaming and very little concern for geometry. The result is something between a tavern brawl and a sheep stampede, only less organised. When the knight tries to get you to practice flanking manoeuvres, 3 of your men run the wrong way, 1 swings at a bush, and 2 others immediately start fighting each other over whether a shoulder shove was intentional. You're yelled at a lot. The knight's voice cracks with effort, and spittle flies freely from his lips as he curses your mothers, your accents, your lineage, and your ability to hold a pole upright. At one point, he dismounts just to scream into someone's face more directly, only to be knocked over when someone else trips and barrels into him. No one helps him up. The man lies there for a moment, twitching like a beetle flipped on its back, before dragging himself to his feet and calling for live blades. The practice sticks are taken away. Real weapons are handed out. You try not to look surprised. Armour is a myth. The French troops have bits and pieces, a breastplate here, a helmet there, maybe a mail coif if they're lucky. But the Scots are given nothing. Just wool tunics, wooden shields that might stop a sharp breeze, and the same rusted swords you saw being handed out 2 days ago from a barrel that smelled like urine. You strap your blade to your hip with a length of rope and hope it doesn't fall out mid-charge. You're told the armour will come later, after you've earned it. You're not told how many men die before that happens. Judging by the looks on the veterans' faces, most never make it past the rope phase. The training grounds themselves are just an open field with some stumps marking lines, and a scattering of old banners flapping limply from sticks. The ground is uneven, pitted with holes and slick with mud. Someone loses a boot, someone else twists an ankle, a third man charges headlong into a tree during a mock retreat. You're starting to suspect this entire operation was designed by people who've never actually been to a battlefield and just read a poem about one once. The knight doesn't seem to notice, or care. He just keeps shouting. You practice formations that fall apart the moment anyone sneezes. Lines that turn into knots. Advance orders that no one hears because half the unit doesn't speak the same language. You try using hand signals, but end up inventing a whole new dialect of frantic waving that mostly means, "Don't hit me, I'm on your side." It doesn't work. Someone smashes you in the ribs with the flat of their sword, and you retaliate instinctively with the butt of your pike, catching them square in the jaw. There's a lot of blood. You both get yelled at. You're not sure who won. The drills blur into each other. Days pass, or maybe just hours that feel long enough to break your sense of time. Your hands blister, your arms ache, your boots squelch with a sound that suggests something has died inside them. You wake up sore, go to sleep sore, and spend the middle part of the day being screamed at for bleeding on the wrong part of the dirt. The knight brings in a second officer to help translate, but the man just stands there grinning like he's watching livestock learn to walk upright. He corrects nothing. He offers no aid. He just laughs when you fall down again. You learn the basic rhythm eventually, not because you're taught, but because you watch the others and start copying what seems to get the fewest bruises. You stop asking questions. You stop making eye contact. You stop thinking about the purpose of any of this, because the only real goal appears to be getting shouted at until your ears ring and your fingers bleed. You spend more time on the ground than upright. Every now and then someone is dragged off to the medic tent. You don't ask if they come back. You don't want to know. Then comes your first proper skirmish drill, a live-action simulation, as the knight puts it, as though you're rehearsing for a play and not a massacre. Blunted weapons are replaced with real ones. You're told to run, strike, hold, fall back, advance again, and do it all while being screamed at in 2 languages and hit from 3 directions. Chaos doesn't even begin to cover it. One of the Frenchmen misidentifies your tartan and stabs at you mid-charge. You parry out of sheer luck, only to catch a pike shaft to the jaw from someone behind you who thought you were an enemy. You don't even have time to scream before your tooth cracks and something warm splatters across your cheek. You stumble back, disoriented, weapon lost somewhere in the churn. Someone's blood is in your eye. You don't know if it's yours. You can't see straight. The shouting continues, distant and garbled, like you've sunk underwater. Your knees give way. Someone trips over you. A boot lands in your side with the subtle grace of a thrown brick. You curl into the mud and wait for it to stop. Eventually, it does. The knight calls a halt. You sit up, bleeding, dazed, and missing half your awareness. The knight tells you the drill was a qualified success. No one asks what that means. No one cheers. One man doesn't get up. He's not dead, just unconscious. Probably. Maybe. You're not checking. You're too busy spitting blood and trying to decide whether the ringing in your ears is external or permanent. Training is over for the day, or maybe the week. You're not told. You're just handed a half loaf of crusty bread, waved in the direction of your sleeping spot, and left to contemplate the fact that you haven't even fought the English yet. And you already look like you've lost. It's not a real battle. That's the first thing they tell you, as if that's supposed to be comforting. Just a little skirmish, they say. A scouting clash, nothing more. Something quick, something small. A dozen Englishmen, maybe 2 dozen, poking around the forest edge and getting too close to French supply lines. You're to go flush them out. Hit fast, hit hard, and be back by nightfall. Simple, clean, forgettable. The sort of task they give to expendable men with dull blades and no noble lineage to miss them. Which is to say, your unit. You're half asleep when the order comes, pulled from your spot in the mud, bread still halfway to your mouth, shoved into formation with a dozen others whose names you still don't know. The French knight isn't coming. He sends a lieutenant instead, a younger man with clean gloves and too many teeth. He calls it a chance to prove yourselves, which is always a warning, never a promise. You're handed a fresh pike with a split in the shaft and told to stay low. You're not sure what that means in a forest, but you nod anyway and fall into the shuffling march through wet leaves and broken branches. The woods close in fast. You lose the horizon within minutes, replaced by bare trunks and the sound of damp boots squelching through old moss. Birds scatter overhead. Your breath fogs in the cold. No one speaks. The man in front of you has a boil behind his ear that's starting to leak. The one behind you keeps muttering prayers under his breath. Too fast and too quiet to make sense. You try not to think about what's coming. You try not to think at all. It's easier that way. When the first arrow comes, you don't see it. You hear the sound, a sharp, wet thunk. And then the man next to you folds like spoiled cloth, the shaft jutting from his collarbone like a handle. He makes a noise or tries to, but it's lost in the shouting that erupts all around you. The lieutenant bellows something in French and waves his sword like he's directing traffic. Men scatter. Some charge forward, some backward. One just drops his weapon and bolts into the trees, never looking back. You stand there a moment too long before instinct kicks in and you hurl yourself sideways into a bush. Everything that follows is chaos. Not the kind you rehearse in drills, but the real kind. Muddy, loud, directionless. Blades clash with no rhythm. Men scream in half a dozen languages. You see someone tackle an English scout and bite him on the neck like a dog. Another man swings wildly at shadows and manages to disarm a tree. You don't know who's winning. You don't think it matters. The only rule is, don't die. The only strategy is swing faster than the man trying to kill you. You're knocked down 3 times in the first 5 minutes. Once by a fellow Scot who panics and tries to run straight through you. Once by a falling tree limb that catches your shoulder like it has a personal grudge. And once by a body, already dead, probably, that lands across your legs with a sound you'll never forget. You scramble up each time, gasping, slipping, gripping your pike like it might remember how to be useful. Your arms ache, your breath burns. The mud is halfway up your thighs, and the smell of blood is starting to drown out the rot. You spot your first Englishman when he's already coming toward you, sword raised, eyes wide, teeth bared like he's laughing or snarling or both. He's about your size, maybe younger, with a patchy beard and a dented helmet that wobbles when he runs. You don't have time to think. You raise your pike and thrust. It doesn't go in cleanly. It never does. It catches on his mail, glances off a rib, then plunges in just below his arm with a sickening resistance. He screams high-pitched, desperate, ugly, and grabs the shaft. You try to pull it back. He won't let go. You twist. He slips, and then he's on the ground, kicking once, twice, and going still. You freeze. Not from fear, not exactly, but from the sheer weight of it. You've killed before, But not like this. Not this close, not this slow. Your hand is slick. The pike is sticky. There's blood on your tunic, on your face, on your lips. You taste it without meaning to. It's warm and metallic and horribly human. You want to retch, but there's no time. Someone barrels past you, shoulder checking you into a tree, and you stagger forward, back into the fray. There's no formation left. If there ever was one, it dissolved the moment the first man screamed. You find yourself swinging at anything that moves too quickly, pausing only when you recognise the shape of a fellow mercenary, a tartan, a shout in rough Scots, a shared look of hollow panic. You parry a blow from a short sword, duck under a clumsy overhead swing, and bash the flat of your pike into someone's knee with a wet crack. You're not fighting well. You're just fighting harder than you ever have, because the alternative is getting trampled into the soil and left there to rot until the birds grow brave. You lose count of the bodies. You stop trying to tell whose side anyone's on. At one point, you find yourself back to back with a Frenchman you've never met, both of you panting, bleeding, shoulders heaving. You nod. He spits. You swing again. He stabs something that might have been an Englishman, or might have been a terrified peasant holding a stick. Neither of you check. You just move. Eventually, the noise dulls. The screaming dies down. The blades stop clashing. You don't notice it at first. It's like someone turning down a bell very slowly, until you realise you can hear your own breath again. It's ragged, shallow, wet. You're standing in the middle of what used to be a clearing, and is now a slaughterhouse. The mud has turned to soup, red and brown, and churned with footprints and intestines. You can't see your feet. You don't want to. Someone calls for retreat, or victory, or both. It's hard to tell. The few still standing start to regroup, limping, dragging the wounded, ignoring the dead. You stumble toward them dazed, hands trembling, one leg barely responding. There's blood on your face, not yours. You wipe at it and smear it worse. Your pike is gone, left buried in someone you didn't stop to identify. You have a dagger, but it's bent, useless. You keep it anyway. You survive. That's what they'll say later. You were in your first fight, and you lived through it. But you know better. You didn't survive because you were clever or brave. You survived because someone else screamed louder. Someone else bled more obviously. Someone else took the sword that would have ended you. That's the truth. No one tells in the songs. You don't talk about the skirmish afterward. Not because it was too traumatic, but because no one asks. No one cares. You limp back into camp blood-stained and shaking, and the quartermaster grunts when he sees your face like you've brought him paperwork instead of a concussion. You sleep that night like a stone, twitching every time someone coughs too close, and wake up sore in places you didn't know had nerves. You think briefly that maybe they'll let you rest, maybe this will earn you something, a real weapon, a proper ration, a moment to breathe. It doesn't. By morning, you're already being ordered back on your feet. They tell you it's a short march, just 20 miles give or take to secure a nearby town. You're not told what that means. Secure it from whom, for what purpose, or whether it's still standing. You ask, and someone shrugs. Another man just laughs. You pack up what little you have, a crust of bread, half a flask of water that already smells off, and your cloak, which has stopped pretending to be warm, and now functions mostly as a wet sack with holes. There are no carts, no horses, you're walking. Everyone is walking. Some of the older soldiers mutter that this is standard procedure. You're beginning to understand that standard just means awful, but not surprising. The rain starts 20 minutes after you leave camp and doesn't stop. It's not the dramatic kind that pounds the ground like a drum. This is the slow, steady kind. The kind that seeps in past every layer, drips down your neck, and saturates your socks until you feel like you're walking on raw meat. Your boots begin to rub, then blister, then bleed. You try not to limp, because limping gets you noticed, and being noticed gets you yelled at or reassigned to carry something even heavier than your own disappointment. So you keep walking, jaw clenched, foot squelching, pretending your socks aren't now mostly scab. The lice are worse on the move. They seem to enjoy the motion, burrowing deeper, spreading faster, like the march is some kind of grand holiday for them. You scratch without meaning to, dragging your nails along the inside of your tunic until the skin there is red and raw and starting to peel. You stop caring whether anyone sees. Everyone else is doing the same. A chorus of scratching and muttering that follows the column like a bad song. The smell is something between wet wool, old breath, and the kind of rot that comes from feet never properly dried. There's no food issued on the march. You were given a ration the day before, which you already ate, and now you're told to make do, which apparently means digging up roots, scouring hedges for berries, or chewing bits of leather if you're desperate enough. One man eats a snail, another grabs a half-rotted apple from a roadside shrine and gets punched by a French soldier for desecrating holy offerings. You try to chew a bit of hard crust you'd stuffed into your boot days ago. It tastes like mildew and toe sweat. You finish it anyway. The French officers ride ahead, wrapped in furs and mounted on horses that look better fed than you've been in weeks. They shout commands that you don't hear or don't understand and don't bother repeating. Occasionally, they pause to consult maps or argue among themselves, usually in voices just loud enough for the rest of you to pick up on the confusion. One officer insists the town is west, another says it's due south. At one point, you double back for nearly an hour before someone realises they've mistaken a ruined mill for a crossroads. No one apologises. You keep walking. Men begin to drop. Slowly at first, like a stumble here, a twisted ankle there, but by the second day, the pace of collapse starts to pick up. One man simply stops walking and sits down in the mud. When told to move, he doesn't respond. When kicked, he still doesn't move. Eventually, the column continues without him. You don't look back, neither does anyone else. Another man vomits blood into his hands and is quietly rolled into a ditch. No one asks if he was sick before the march started. It's safer not to know. The landscape doesn't change. Fields, trees, mud, more fields. A dead ox rotting in a ditch, its ribs open to the sky like the bars of a broken harp. A village long abandoned, its thatch blackened, its windows gaping. You pass a ruined chapel with a crucifix hanging sideways from the bell tower. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else spits. You're not sure who you agree with. Your thighs burn. Your calves ache. Your hips throb with every step. You feel your body pulling apart in places you didn't know had seams. At night, there's no fire. Too risky, someone says. You huddle under your cloak, which is still wet, and try to sleep without shivering hard enough to bruise yourself. The ground is cold, the wind sharper than anything you faced in battle. Someone coughs through the night, not the dry kind, but the wet, rattling kind that suggests something dying inside. You press your hands against your ears, as if that could keep the sound out. You don't know his name, you don't want to. Knowing names makes it worse when they stop answering roll call. You reach the town late on the third day. You'd imagined something modest. A few stone houses, a chapel, maybe a wall if you were lucky. Instead, you arrive to find smouldering ruins and the faint smell of cooked flesh. The buildings are half collapsed, scorched black from roof to root, and the air tastes of ash. You ask what happened. No one answers directly, but someone mutters that it was torched by friendly forces a few days before. Wrong timing, wrong orders, wrong town. You don't even know who was supposed to be here in the first place. The officer leading your unit shrugs and tells everyone to rest, as if there's anywhere safe or clean to sit. You collapse near what used to be a fountain. It's filled with black water and what might be bones. You don't ask. You take off your boots and inspect your feet. They're pale, wrinkled, weeping pus around the blisters. One toenail is gone. Another is hanging on by what looks like a thread of gristle. You consider cutting it off with your dagger, but the blade is too dull and your hands are shaking too badly to aim. You wrap them in rags and pray they don't rot off before the next march. No one mentions the march back. You assume there will be one. There always is. But for now, the officers are arguing again. One says to set up camp. Another says to move on. A third says to wait for reinforcements that may or may not exist. You stop listening after a while. You lean your head back against a scorched wall, close your eyes, and try to remember why you're here. You can't. Your hands still smell like ash and rotted leather. Your stomach growls at nothing. And somewhere nearby, someone is digging through a half-burned cart for bread that doesn't crumble at the touch. You've marched 20 miles for nothing, and you'll march 20 more for the same. One day, you're woken before dawn by the butt of a spear nudging your ribs. Not violently, just enough to let you know that whatever rest you thought you were owed has been revoked. You're handed a shovel without explanation. Not a word about enemies, strategy or glory, just a sharp gesture toward a stretch of muddy earth near the forward line, and a vague muttering that might have meant dig. You assume you're about to clear another waste trench. Instead, you find yourself in the middle of a siege operation you didn't know had started. The fortress ahead doesn't look impressive. A stumpy little thing wedged between two hills, its stone walls more moss than masonry. Still, it has height, and walls, and people inside who have no intention of letting you in. You're told this place is tactically important. You're not told why. Maybe it guards a road, maybe a supply line, maybe someone's uncle used to live there, and the commander's feeling sentimental. Either way, it's now your world, a ruined field, a few lines of matted earthworks, and a cold wind that cuts through every layer of clothing you own. By mid-morning, the ground under your boots has already turned into a slop pit. The siege lines are just wide, shallow ditches that fill with water faster than you can empty them. You dig all day, shoveling mud from one place to another, and then sleep beside the trench you just made, like a worm who's learned to hate dirt. Tents are rare, and firewood even rarer. You share a fire with 6 other men and still wake up cold. Someone stole your blanket. You're not surprised. You'd have done the same. Food, if you can call it that, is served twice a day. It comes in dented cauldrons that smell of boiled shoe leather and regret. Gruel, salt meat, hard bread. Nothing warm, nothing fresh. You start to dream of texture, not even flavour, just the idea of food that doesn't dissolve into a paste in your mouth. On the worst days, you chew strips of your own belt to stave off the hunger pangs. One man eats candle wax and tells everyone it's not that bad. You believe him. That's the worrying part. Lice thrive in the trenches. They flourish like crops, multiplying across every wool seam and crawling into every crevice they can find. Your arms are lined with red scratches. Your thighs burn from where they've nested. You try boiling your clothes, but there's no clean water, and the steam just makes the air feel thicker. One soldier claims he got rid of his lice by sleeping naked in the snow. He hasn't been seen since. You suspect the lice won. You were told this would be a siege, but it feels more like a test, not of strength or courage, but of sheer, stubborn rottenness. Every day is the same. You dig, you watch, you itch, you eat something that might be food. You sleep in a puddle that used to be a sleeping mat. Then it starts again. There's no progress, no sense of movement. The fortress hasn't budged, neither have you. It's as if both sides have agreed, silently, that death by mildew is preferable to an honest fight. The fortress occupants send their greetings in the form of airborne corpses. One lands not far from your trench, bursting open like a melon. The smell hits before the body does, thick, sour, and wrong in every possible way. It clings to your clothes for hours. You try not to breathe, which only helps until you black out and fall into the mud again. Sometimes they fling severed limbs. Sometimes whole bodies. One day, a pig. You don't know if it's a warning or just someone's idea of a joke. Disease arrives like a second army. It slips through the camp under cover of fog, curling into sleeping rolls and licking sweat from your brow. The fevers are sudden and savage. Men cough so hard They vomit, then choke on what they brought up. Some lie still for a day or two, then go cold in the night. There's no medicine, only vinegar, prayers and hot iron. You hear the French have a surgeon, but he only treats officers and men who still have all their teeth. You try not to smile too widely when you speak. There's talk of reinforcements, there's talk of surrender, there's talk of someone bringing in trebuchets. It's all talk, nothing changes. You start to forget what month it is, then what week, then what day. Your boots never dry, your socks rot inside them. Your breath smells like whatever you ate last, which most of the time is nothing. A man collapses into the trench beside you and doesn't get back up. He's still breathing, so no one moves him. He's warm, that's all that matters. One morning, a cannon appears at the edge of camp, new, sleek, and hauled in with ceremony by men in clean uniforms who reek of optimism and fresh leather. You immediately hate them. They set it up within range of the fortress wall and prepare for a grand show. You're assigned to assist the artillery team, which means hauling powder, fetching tools, and trying not to breathe too deeply when the wind shifts. The cannon fires once, the boom is deafening. The crew cheers. You don't. The second shot hits a wall and chips off a chunk of stone the size of a goat. More cheering. Someone sings. You feel uneasy, not because of the sound, but because it's the first sign of hope you've seen in weeks, and that never ends well. The third shot misfires and it happens all at once. A shriek of metal, a plume of black smoke, a scream cut short before it even clears a throat. You see fire, not from the muzzle but from the breach, and men vanish into it. The cannon explodes in two directions, forward into nothing and sideways into the crew. Shrapnel flies like birds with no wings. A hot iron shard cuts the man next to you, clean across the jaw. He was asleep. You didn't even know his name. You don't look away. You just blink and feel something warm hit your cheek. The officers say nothing. The cannon is covered with a tarp. The cheering stops. Everything returns to the same dull crawl of digging, coughing, chewing, and watching the rain slide down the same two stones in the same way it has for weeks. This is what siege season really means. No charges, no breakthroughs, no glory. Just slow, wet waiting. Until someone misfires or melts or rots. Or maybe, if you're lucky, until the other side does it first. By November, the mud begins to freeze. Not fully, that would be a kindness, but just enough to make walking feel like trudging through half-set cement. Your boots, already more whole than leather, stiffen into cracked shells that rub your heels raw. You try stuffing them with straw. It turns to mush, then mould, then something you stop identifying. Each morning starts with a slow, agonizing attempt to flex your fingers back into motion. They don't want to. The cold has made them brittle, and every small movement feels like testing whether your skin will tear away with the glove. The siege doesn't end. Nothing ends. The fortress still stands. The walls are dusted in frost now, like some kind of mockery, a postcard version of war. Your camp, meanwhile, sinks further into the grey. The fires grow smaller, then rarer, then vanish almost entirely. The officers say firewood is being rationed. What they mean is that the officers have firewood. You don't. You huddle in your cloak, which by now is just a wet sponge draped over bones, and you try to remember what warmth felt like. The memory is vague, unreliable, like a dream someone else had. Food arrives less frequently, and when it does, it's often spoiled. You find weevils in your flour. You eat it anyway. You boil your last bit of boot leather until it's soft enough to chew. The taste is indescribable, and not in a poetic way. One man catches a rat. He parades it around like a trophy, before skinning it with his belt buckle and tossing the scraps into a communal pot. You pretend it's stew. You pretend the bones at the bottom aren't from something with fur. You pretend a lot of things. It helps the food go down, if not stay down. Frostbite becomes the new plague. It starts with your toes, a numbness that creeps in one morning and never leaves. By the next day, they're grey. You can't feel them, even when you stomp or prod or curse at them. One of the older mercenaries offers to amputate them with a hatchet and a hot blade. You politely decline, then spend the next 3 nights watching your feet in the dark, trying to decide whether losing a few toes is better than losing your whole leg. You wrap them tighter. They stop bleeding. You take that as a win. Respiratory sickness spreads like fire through dry grass, except nothing is dry. The air is damp, thick, and full of phlegm-soaked coughing. Men wheeze through the night, rattling like broken bellows, their breath steaming against the tent walls. You wake up coughing blood once, just a little, just a thread. You don't mention it. No one else does either. Everyone's too busy pretending the noises coming from their lungs are just the cold. The cold, you think, is the only honest thing left in this camp. At least it doesn't lie about what it's here to do. Your tent, if it can still be called that, sags in the centre, weighed down by a thin crust of snow and a lot of bad luck. The stakes have rotted out. You prop the fabric with a broken spear shaft and a rock, then cover the holes with rags soaked in your own sweat. At night, frost forms on the inside. You wake up dusted in it, your eyebrows rimed with ice, your breath fogging so heavily you think for a moment the tent is on fire. It's not. That would at least be warm. Every movement hurts now. Your knees grind when you walk. Your fingers sting even inside gloves. The blisters on your feet have stopped popping. They're just open wounds now. You limp without thinking. You cough without noticing. One day, you slice open a chunk of salted pork and realise you've bled into it. You eat it anyway. Someone offers to trade a handful of boiled barley for your cloak. You consider it for a full minute. Then you say no. You don't know if that was the right call. Command keeps saying the fortress will fall any day now, that the enemy is starving, that their morale is broken. You stop listening. Their fires still burn at night. You can see the smoke. You'd envy them if you didn't know they're probably just as miserable, just more organised about it. Someone jokes that the 2 sides should just swap places and agree to pretend the war happened. No one laughs. Humour died weeks ago, somewhere between the lice and the trench foot. Speaking of which, your feet smell like death. A sour, milky stink that clings to your socks even after boiling. The skin is soft in the wrong way, like fruit left too long in the sun. You check them each night, peeling away the rags with shaking fingers. They're pink, then red, then white, then a colour that has no name. You rub them to keep the blood moving. You think it helps. You tell yourself it helps. You need something to believe in, even if it's circulation. Your tent mate, a wiry Breton with more beard than face and a laugh like a dying mule, has stopped speaking. He mumbled something 2 nights ago about home. You think he said apple tree, or maybe arrow wound. You couldn't quite tell. Last night, he didn't move at all. You didn't check. You didn't want to. This morning you roll over and bump into him. He's stiff. His eyes are open, but there's no frost on his breath. His lips are cracked, and the colour has drained from every part of him. You touch his shoulder. It's like pressing wood. You don't scream. You don't cry. You just sit there for a while, letting the frost collect on both of you. You try to remember his name. You fail. You wonder if he ever knew yours. Outside, the wind picks up. A French officer shouts something about rations and posts. Someone coughs so hard they fall down. Somewhere, distant and muffled, a cannon fires, not from your side. You close your eyes and listen to the sound of the frozen canvas flapping above your head. It's still not the worst morning you've had. By the time the worst of the cold settles in, you're no longer sure what month it is. Maybe December, maybe not. The days blur into grey sameness, hunger, cold, breath like smoke, fingers that don't bend. The frost never melts anymore. The ground is too hard to bury anything, and the stink never goes away. It just sharpens into something more specific. Then the coughing starts, not a normal one, not the dry, hacking chorus that's been echoing through camp since the first frost, but something deeper, wet, muffled like someone drowning in a puddle of their own ribs, The man sleeps through it, or tries to. By morning his bedroll is smeared with blood. Not much, just enough to stain. Just enough to signal something's begun. You don't say anything, neither does he. You both pretend not to notice, as if ignoring it might push the sickness back down into his chest where it belongs. 2 days later, he's dead. He never got up. He didn't cry out. He just started breathing a little slower, then stopped. You poke him with a stick gently, because you've learned better than to touch the bodies directly. His skin is pale and mottled, his lips cracked. There's a faint smell that you tell yourself is just the tent. You drag him outside by the ankles. It takes longer than it should. He's heavier now, somehow. Or maybe you're weaker. You leave him in the designated pit with the others. Some are covered with lime, most are not. The dirt is frozen too hard to bury anyone properly, so the corpses sit half exposed, a graveyard in slow motion. The coughing spreads, then the shivering, then the pustules. Some swell under the armpits or groin. Others burst open into foul-smelling craters that leak pus through bandages too thin to contain it. You hear whispers, La Peste, bubonic, black, biblical. Some call it the punishment of God. Others call it France. You stop caring what it's called. You care that the man sleeping 3 feet from you has a boil on his neck the size of a chicken egg. He asks you to help lance it. You say no. You walk away. The medics are overwhelmed by the 2nd week of outbreak. That's assuming you can call them medics. One is a priest who doubles as a barber. Another is a woman from a nearby village who mostly just cries. The treatment varies by mood. Sometimes it's cauterization, a hot iron pressed to the wound until the screaming stops. Sometimes it's leeches, sometimes it's vinegar or a prayer or a poultice made of herbs, mould and desperation. No one recovers. They either rot slower or die faster. The man who agreed to leech therapy is found convulsing in his own bile. The priest calls it purification. You call it murder with good intentions. Dysentery joins the chorus soon after. It creeps through the latrines like spilled ink, painting everything with a stench that makes your eyes water. It hits fast and leaves nothing behind. You see men waste away in 2 days, shitting themselves until their bodies cramp into husks. Their screams are quieter, not from lack of pain, but from the sheer exhaustion of it. They die curled up like children, shaking and soiled, their skin paper thin, and their mouths caked with dried spittle. You step around them when you can. You stop checking for signs of life. It doesn't matter. If they're not dead now, they will be by morning. The pox comes last, like a cruel joke. Syphilis, they say, though no one's entirely sure how half these men even had the energy to contract it. It manifests as ulcers, cracked lips, blisters on unmentionable places, and a madness that builds quietly in the back of the skull. One man strips naked and starts singing. Another digs a hole and refuses to come out. A third is caught trying to eat his own fingers. They call it divine punishment. You call it losing. You don't laugh. You might be next. You keep your head down. You drink only from your own flask. You don't share rations. You don't pray, humming, not because you don't believe, but because the man leading the prayers has boils on his eyelids and keeps muttering the wrong words. You avoid the sick, even when they reach out and beg. You tell yourself, it's self-preservation, that they do the same. You start wearing a scarf over your mouth, not because it helps, but because it gives you something to hide behind. Some men fashion masks from cloth and charcoal. Others smear themselves with mud and herbs like it's armour. Nothing works. Death moves how it wants, and it's not impressed by costumes. Every night, more bodies are dragged to the pits. Fewer men are available to do the dragging. You take a turn once, hauling a young soldier who'd only been with you for a week. He didn't speak. Might have been Flemish. He died with his hands clenched around a saint's medallion. It's still there when you roll him in. The fool snaps his wrist, and the hand releases. The medallion, lands in the mud. You don't pick it up. You think about it, but you don't. The camp shrinks, not physically. The tents are still there, sagging like broken teeth, but in population. You see fewer familiar faces each morning. More are missing at roll call. No one asks where they went. You assume the pit. You stop learning names. You forget some of the ones you already knew. The man beside you hums the same song for days before falling silent. You don't know if he's dead or just done humming. You don't check. You don't want to touch him. He might still be warm. Eventually, it hits you. Fever first, like in a wave of heat that rolls up your spine and into your skull, leaving your skin burning and your teeth aching. You try to sweat it out. Then you stop sweating. You curl into yourself, cloaked in your ragged blanket, mouth dry, limbs twitching. Your vision blurs. The world becomes noise. Shuffling boots, distant screams, coughing in every key imaginable. You drift. You hallucinate. You think you see your mother, then a priest, then something without a face. You lose track of time. But no one comes, no medic, no priest, no burial team. You are lucky in the cruelest way possible. You're too far gone to beg for help, and too quiet to be noticed. The sick are avoided now, left to die where they lie. It's safer that way. No one checks on you. No one pokes, prods, or mutters prayers. They assume you're already dead. And because of that, you live. The fever breaks. It takes hours or maybe days. You wake with your mouth tasting of rust, your limbs soaked in cold sweat, your heart beats soft and stupid in your ears. You move a finger, then a hand, then your head. You're still here. No one notices. No one cares. You could have died 5 times and no one would have marked the spot. You lie there a while, breathing quietly, staring up at the tent ceiling, the same stain still there in the corner. Outside, the coughing continues. Somewhere, a priest sings off key. Another body drags past your tent flap. Another name you never learned. You come out of the sickness lighter, in body, in memory, in anything resembling care. You don't celebrate surviving. You don't mention it at all. The pit of corpses grows. The tents grow quieter. You drift through the camp like a ghost who never left. No one meets your eye. No one welcomes you back. The priest skips your tent during evening prayers, probably assuming you're still dying. You don't correct him. You don't know what you did to earn the honour, but one morning you're told you're being reassigned, pulled from the trench line and sent to join a patrol detail with a detachment of French knights. At first, this sounds like it might be a good thing. Better equipment, more structure, fewer lice-ridden tent mates dying in their sleep. You even imagine, briefly, that you might finally get a hot meal and something resembling a real plan. But then you meet them. They don't speak to you, not directly. One looks at you like you've just insulted his horse. Another spits at your feet. These aren't the cheerful lads from camp you've traded crusts and life stories with. These are noble-born Frenchmen with polished armour, war horses, and centuries of disdain baked into their jawlines. They know who you are the moment they see the tartan. You're not a soldier to them. You're a hired cudgel with fleas and a drinking problem. You're a savage who doesn't know how to march in formation or hold the right end of a spear. You can feel it in the silence, in the way they give you the worst horse, the dullest sword, and a position at the far end of the column, where it's easier to pretend you're not there. Guard duty is more ceremonial than useful. You ride patrols around the perimeter of the camp or along nearby roads supposedly threatened by English scouts. Most days you don't see anything, just frost-bitten trees and mud-rutted paths that all look the same. But the French knights make sure you know your place. They eat separately, talk in low tones, and share bread only with each other. One of them steals your water flask when he thinks you're not looking. Another, accidentally, jabs you in the ribs with the butt of his lance during a drill. You say nothing. You're not sure who'd believe you if you did. And besides, you need the assignment. It's the only reason you're not still back in the plague tent. You try to stay invisible. You answer only when spoken to. You don't ask questions. When you're told to scout ahead, you go. When you're told to fall back, You do it without a word. But it's not enough. They don't want you invisible. They want you gone. There's no camaraderie here, no shared suffering. These men don't see you as a brother in arms. They see you as a problem they're being forced to tolerate, a ticking inconvenience, a blade pointed in the wrong direction. You hear one of them call you apat, bait. You're not sure if you're meant to hear it. It doesn't matter. The tension doesn't stay quiet for long. One night, you return to camp to find your pack has been slit open. Your coin is gone, so is half your food. The Frenchmen claim ignorance, of course. They sneer when you bring it up. One laughs and says something about Highland clumsiness. Another offers you a piece of your own bread. You take it without looking him in the eye. You don't need more enemies than you already have. But that night, you sleep with your dagger in your hand, and your back to a tree. Fist fights break out between other mercenary groups, not over politics or tactics, but over boots, scraps of meat, dry places to sleep. The camp is fraying at the seams. The nobles still dine in their tents, sipping wine and arguing about maps, while the rest of you fight over a half-rotten turnip. Trust is a luxury no one can afford. You see one man stabbed for a belt. Another has his gloves stolen while he's still wearing them. You've stopped thinking of your fellow soldiers as comrades. They're just obstacles that haven't killed you yet. One morning, the French officer leading your unit announces a reconnaissance mission. The usual route, same stretch of forest, same pace, but there's something different in his voice. A brittle edge, like he's already made a decision he's not sharing. You mount up, nerves prickling. The French ride ahead in a tight formation, too fast for you to keep pace. You lag behind, trying to keep them in view through the trees. Your horse struggling through the half-frozen mud. Then the arrows start, no warning, just the sharp hiss of air and the thud of impact. One buries itself in the trunk next to your head. Another hits your horse in the flank. It rears and throws you, and you hit the ground so hard your ribs rattle. You scramble for your weapon, heart pounding, only to look up and realise the French knights are already gone. No shouts, no return fire, no defence. They've vanished, bolted into the trees at the first sign of danger, leaving you alone in the clearing with whoever's decided you'd make a good pincushion. You don't wait to be introduced, you run. Not bravely, not heroically, you sprint through the trees like a man being chased by God himself. Branches tear at your face, mud sucks at your boots, you don't look back. You're too afraid of what you'll see. You don't even know who attacked English scouts, brigands, deserters. Could be anyone. Doesn't matter. All that matters is that you're alone, unarmed, and very clearly the expendable piece of this particular game. By the time you stagger back to camp, your face is scratched, your cloak torn, and your left arm completely numb. The guards don't stop you. No one seems surprised to see you alive. No one asks where the others are. They return later, hours after you, looking clean and unbothered. One has a leaf in his hair, another is eating an apple. They don't speak to you. They don't even acknowledge that you exist. You realise then, with a cold clarity that cuts deeper than the wind, that this wasn't an accident. You were never supposed to come back. You lie down on your bedroll that night and stare at the tent roof, unable to sleep. Not from pain or fear or even the cold, but from knowing, finally unquestionably, that the people meant to fight beside you would rather see you bleed in a ditch than share their rations. You're not a soldier to them. You're not even bait anymore. You're ballast. And sooner or later, they're going to cut the rope. A few days later, you receive new orders. You're not told where you're going, only that you're marching again. This time, there's an urgency to it, an energy that's either confidence or panic, depending on who's speaking. The officers use words like decisive and turning point and rallying position, but none of it means anything to you. You recognise the tone, though. It's the same one they used before that skirmish, where half your unit bled into the dirt for no reason. You've learned to hear the lie in optimism. Still, you walk. The march is longer than usual and heavier. The knights ride ahead, armour gleaming, banners snapping in the wind, like they're posing for a tapestry that hasn't been commissioned yet. Behind them stumble the rest of you, the mercenaries, the levies, the men with rusted swords, and nothing left to lose. You travel for days, or something that feels like days, across churned fields and sunken roads, past ruined villages and twitching trees. At one point, you pass a pile of corpses, already stripped by scavengers. No one slows down. You tell yourself it's not a sign. When you reach the battlefield, it's a broad open plain, flanked by woods and low ridges. The kind of place that looks perfectly designed to be soaked in blood. French banners flap from stakes driven into the ground, and the air stinks of horses' sweat and the sharp tang of iron. You're positioned near the back, not because you're needed there, but because you're expendable, and someone has to soak up the arrows after the cavalry fails. Your boots are already muddy. Your stomach is already tight. No one gives you a speech. There's no rousing call. Just a shove forward and a muttered command to hold the line. You don't even know who you're fighting, not exactly. English, almost certainly. Maybe Burgundians, maybe both. Maybe just hungry men in different colours. You recognise the longbows, though, those impossibly fast arcs of death that whisper through the air before exploding in bone and screams. You remember what happened the last time your side underestimated English archers. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else throws up. You tighten your grip on your weapon and try not to notice your hands shaking. Then it begins. There's no clear signal, no trumpet, no drum. Just a sudden lurch. Horses galloping, men shouting, your own legs stumbling forward, because everyone else is moving, and you don't want to be trampled under your own side. The front ranks surge. You lose sight of the officers almost immediately. The battle opens like a wound, wide, wet and screaming. Arrows fall first, a hiss in the air, then the sound of impact, soft thuds for the lucky ones, sharper cracks for the rest. You see a man take one through the cheek and fall without a sound. Another drops mid-sprint, arrow jutting from his spine like a grotesque feather. You lift your shield, if you have one. If not, you just run and hope the next volley doesn't have your name on it. Then the lines collide. You don't see it exactly. It's not cinematic, it's chaotic. No formation, no elegant clashes, just the sudden crush of bodies, the clang of metal, the stink of blood and piss, and open mouths screaming things no one hears. You swing your weapon, or try to. Mostly you just shove and try not to trip. Your foot slips on something soft. You look down and realise it's a hand, still attached to someone. You don't have time to care. You don't know who you hit. You don't know if it mattered. You catch a glimpse of a man in English colours coming at you with a mace. You duck. He swings high. Someone else takes the blow instead, and his jaw folds sideways. The blood hits your face warm. You don't stop to check if he's alive. You lunge, stab, twist, scream, fall, scramble, rise again. It's not bravery, it's instinct. You've become a piece of meat trying to stay moving. You lose your weapon at some point, pulled from your grip, or stuck in someone, or just knocked aside in the shuffle. You pick up another, a dented axe missing a chunk. It works. You use it, badly, wildly. Someone stabs at you and misses. You swing and connect with something that gives. The man doesn't scream. That's somehow worse, and the battle drags. There's no rhythm to it, no progression, just exhaustion stacked on terror. The ground is slippery with blood. You fall 3 times. The 3rd time, you don't get back up right away. You're on your knees when the cavalry charges, not yours, theirs, and the thunder of hooves turns the air to thunder. You roll, barely avoiding a boot to the ribs, and press yourself against the earth like it might shield you. It doesn't. That's when you see him. A dying man, face down in the mud, chest rising in shallow jerks. He's not your friend. You don't even know him. But he's big, heavy, and still warm. You grab his body and pull it over yours just as another volley of arrows falls. You don't know if it saves you. You just know that he takes one through the back. And you don't. You lie there, heart pounding, your nose full of the smell of blood and shit and wet wool. The man on top of you dies in stages. You feel it. The twitching stops. The breath fades. The weight settles. You stay beneath him, barely breathing, praying that the noise around you will move on. Eventually, it does. The screams grow distant. The hoofbeats fade. The clatter of swords turns into groans. Then silence. You wait. You wait until your arms ache from holding still, until your back burns from the cold. When you finally push the corpse off, you do it gently, like a favour. He saved your life, even if he didn't mean to. You don't remember how you made it off the field. 1 minute you were beneath a corpse, soaked in someone else's blood, and the next you were walking, limping, really, away from the noise, dragging your body toward what passed for a road. No one called for you. No one searched the dead. You simply moved, because that's all your body knew how to do. When you reached the edge of camp, or what was left of it, no one even asked where you'd been. They just handed you a crust of bread and pointed to a place by the fire, like nothing had happened. And maybe it hadn't. Maybe that slaughter wasn't the final push after all, just another failed chapter in a war that refuses to end. The days that follow feel quieter, but not in the peaceful way. In the waiting for something to drop way, the commanders speak in tighter circles, fewer drills, fewer patrols, more silence. Then the rumours start. It starts as a whisper, a muttered phrase traded over a cook fire, passed between two men sharpening blades that barely hold an edge. Someone says the nobles are meeting. Someone else swears an envoy was seen riding out with a white banner. Peace, they say, or at least a truce. Temporary, strategic, negotiated over wine by men who haven't stood in mud since last spring. You try not to care. You're still carrying out patrols, still hauling your aching body down frozen roads to torch barns and strip corpses for supplies. If peace is coming, it's taking the long way around. Your unit is sent to secure provisions from a local village. You know what that means. There's nothing left to requisition. These people are starving, just like you, and the only things of value are whatever they've hidden under their floorboards. You knock on doors, no one answers, you break them down. You find a bag of oats, half a cheese wheel, a child with eyes too wide and a father too slow. You don't kill them, but others do. It's not ordered. It doesn't have to be. The hunger does the talking now, and the rules left months ago. Someone sets fire to a barn. Someone else drags a woman behind a wall and comes back alone. No one stops it. You don't know if you could have, even if you wanted to. You just stand there, with your weapon in your hands, your mouth full of sour bread that tastes like ash, and your stomach twisting with something that isn't quite guilt, but knows its name. You tell yourself, this is what war does, what survival requires. You tell yourself you're not the worst one here. And maybe you're right, but that doesn't help when the smoke rises and the screams don't stop. You return to camp to find nothing has changed. The officers still bark orders. The nobles still eat separately. The rumours of peace keep spreading, louder now, more confident. A list is being drawn up, someone says. A list of those who'll be discharged, paid and sent home. But you're not on it. None of the Scots are. None of the mercenaries. Just the lords, the knights, the men with names long enough to carry weight. The war, it turns out, is over. Or mostly over. Just not for you. You're sent on another patrol 3 days later. It's not combat. Just enforcement. Road control, they call it. A fancy name for making sure no one's fleeing too fast with too much. You rob a farmer of 2 hens and a sack of roots. He begs you to leave his daughter. You do. Others don't. You walk away, fists clenched, jaw tight, heart hollow. You want to tell yourself there was a line once and that you're still on the right side of it. But if there was, the snow's long since covered it. When you get back, the camp is half empty. No ceremony, no announcement, just gone. Tents packed, banners lowered. The men with clean boots and horses have moved on, called back to court or castle to toast to victory and write poetry about all the glory they narrowly witnessed. You and your fellow mercenaries are told nothing. The quartermaster won't look you in the eye. The supply wagons vanish overnight. The next morning, your commander, a man you followed for months without ever hearing him speak above a growl, walks up, hands you a crumpled note stamped with a seal you don't recognise, and says 2 words: "You're done." You don't understand at first. Done with what? With marching? With fighting? With living in a ditch and eating rats? But the answer comes soon enough. You're dismissed, discharged. No coin, no provisions, no escort home, no thank you for your service, or sorry you lost half your unit to dysentery. Just the vague legal language of contract nullification, and a shrug from someone who is never going to bleed beside you anyway. You ask about payment. The commander laughs and walks away. That's the end of the conversation. The French don't want you anymore. Worse, they hate you now. The villagers you once pretended to protect see you as little more than armed thieves, which, to be fair, isn't wrong. You can't buy food because you have nothing to trade, and even if you did, they'd spit in it first. You can't take it by force anymore either. Not alone, not now. You're not a soldier. You're just a man with a sword and a stench and a reputation that hangs off you like smoke. You drift through a ruined village just outside the former front. The place has been burned once, looted twice, and abandoned more recently. You find an intact wall to lean against and sleep there for a night. Then 2, you share a fire with another discharged mercenary, a Flemish man with a limp and a cough that sounds like gravel being stirred in oil. He offers you a crust, you take it. You don't ask where he got it. By morning he's gone, and so is your knife. You figure that's fair. There's no talk of getting back to Scotland. The port is weeks away by foot, and you'd need coin to pay for passage. Coin no one has, and no shipmaster is likely to give on credit to a man with blood under his nails and frostbite in his toes. You don't even know if the war has reached your homeland yet. Maybe they've already buried you there. Maybe they've forgotten you. You try to remember the path back, but all you can see is snow and empty roads. The others, those who weren't lucky enough to die in the field, scatter. Some go south, some west. Some try to join new bands under new flags, selling their steel to whichever side is still fighting somewhere else. You don't. You've had enough of banners, of commands shouted in languages you don't speak, of promises that die quicker than the men who believe them. You sit on a broken stone wall and stare out at a frozen field, the wind cutting through your cloak like you're not even there. You have no orders, no money, no map, just a body that still insists on breathing, and a past you'd trade gladly for a warm meal. Congratulations, you survived the 100 Years' War. Not that it knows your name. You try to go home, or at least in the general direction of what you remember as home. There are no formal routes, no orders, no farewell ceremony, just a vague instinct that north is the right way to walk. A few other mercenaries set out with you, Scots mostly, or what's left of them. Some still carry their weapons, others clutch sacks of food like holy relics. One man insists he has a map, but it's just a scrap of parchment with 4 town names and a grease stain. Still, it's more direction than you have, so you follow. The roads are worse than you remembered. Flooded, frozen, clogged with carts full of refugees who look at you like you're something feral and dangerous. You pass through burned villages, empty towns, and checkpoints held by soldiers from factions you stopped trying to keep track of months ago. Every post is a gamble. Some wave you through, others demand payment, and a few raise their bows before you even finish speaking. One of your companions is shot for not understanding a question fast enough. You leave his body in a ditch and keep walking. You try to find a ship in Rouen. The docks are packed with cargo, livestock, and men who look just as lost as you. You approach a trader and ask the cost of passage. He sizes you up, eyes your patched cloak, your cracked boots, your rusted blade. Then he names a price so obscene you laugh before you realise he's not joking. You offer your sword. He says no. You offer your boots. He still says no. You ask if there's work. He shrugs and tells you to try dying somewhere less crowded. Another man offers you a spot on a barge, headed to England, not Scotland, but closer than here. You hand over the last of your coin. The boat leaves the next morning. Without you. You never find the man again. You consider looking for him. You consider stabbing him, but you're too tired to be angry anymore. So you sit by the river for half a day, staring at the ripples, and then you get back on your feet and walk. The others peel off one by one. Some say they're heading toward Burgundy, where another war is brewing and coin might be easier to earn than a ride home. Others disappear in the night, taking whatever wasn't tied down. A blanket, a knife, half a loaf. One man simply lies down beneath a tree and tells you he's not getting back up. You wait with him for a while. When the flies start gathering around his face, you stop. Your sword breaks during a fall down a ravine outside a ruined mill. You don't bother retrieving the blade. The hilt is useless, the steel too dull to matter. You leave it there, half buried in the mud, and move on with an empty scabbard, and no one left to ask why. Later, you trade the scabbard for a strip of dried meat, and a place to sleep in a half-collapsed barn. The meat gives you cramps. The roof leaks. You still count it as a good night. Your boots fall apart not long after. The leather splits at the seams, and the soles come away entirely. You try to patch them with rope and cloth, but it's a temporary fix that lasts half a morning before unravelling. You walk barefoot for a while, until the stones cut too deep, and the cold starts turning your toes grey again. You beg a merchant for scraps. He gives you a pair of sandals made from straw and string. They last 2 days. You keep the string and throw the rest into a ditch. You stop introducing yourself. There's no point. No one cares what your name is, and you've grown tired of watching people forget it the moment you say it. In some towns, you call yourself simply soldat or écossais. Sometimes you say nothing at all. You sleep in stables, under porches, in graveyards. Once in the ruins of a burned watchtower, beside the body of another wanderer who clearly hadn't been dead long. You take his cloak. It's no warmer than yours, but it smells less like rot. You hear stories of other survivors, a group of mercenaries who made it back to Edinburgh and were arrested for desertion, a pair of archers who sold their longbows and bought a tavern near Calais, a mad Scot living in a forest who thinks he's still fighting the war, challenging travellers to duels in exchange for mouldy bread. You wonder if any of them were men you knew. You wonder if any of them are making it up. You stop caring. Stories are just what the hungry use to patch the holes in their memory. Your hands tremble now, not from cold but from the nerves themselves, overused, underfed, never given time to rest. Your knees grind when you walk. Your breath wheezes when you lie down. One of your molars came loose and never stopped aching. You dream of food that doesn't taste like wood and fire that doesn't smell like burning hair. You forget how old you are, or maybe you never knew. You stop counting the days. They all look the same now. Grey skies, grey mud, grey faces. Eventually, you stop walking. Not because you made it back to Scotland. You didn't. You're still somewhere in France, though where exactly is hard to say. A village, perhaps, or just the edge of one. The road behind you is long, winding, littered with choices that all ended the same way, with cold feet and fewer friends. The road ahead looks no different. You sit down beside a stone wall and rest your back against it. You don't cry, you don't sleep, you just sit blinking slowly while the wind whistles through the grass. You're not going home. There is no home. You're just one more nameless mercenary wandering a country that never wanted you, leaving behind no trace but a smell and a footprint that the next rain will erase. And maybe that's enough. You don't remember how many years it's been. The days blurred first, then the seasons. You used to try to keep track by watching the harvests, by counting the changing colours in the trees, by the way the villagers stopped hiding their food and started just ignoring you. But even that fades after a while. You don't ask what year it is anymore, not because you don't care, though maybe you don't, but because it doesn't make a difference. No one's coming for you. No one even knows where to send the message. You're still in France, or what people are still calling France. The borderlines shift with every new treaty, every new noble spat. The local peasants mutter different names for the same towns now. And sometimes you hear your old commanders' names on travellers' tongues, usually followed by curses or spit. You used to react, used to feel something. Now the names pass through your ears like wind through ruined stone. Just echoes of dead men who were never really alive to begin with. Just like you. You've taken work here and there, ditch digging, grain hauling, a few weeks as a watchman in a place so small it didn't have a wall. No one asked for your story. No one offered you more than a crust and a cot, and you stopped asking for more than that. You learned the language well enough to get by, enough to follow orders, enough to understand insults and ignore them. You tell people you're from the north. No one asks north of where. You pass former comrades sometimes. Or you think you do. Faces warped by time and cold and disappointment. Sometimes you nod. Sometimes they nod back. Sometimes not. You don't share memories. You don't reminisce. What would you say? Remember that time you stood ankle deep in your friend's intestines while a man screamed in Flemish behind you? Remember when we slept beside a corpse because it was the warmest body for miles? No one wants to bring those days back. They never left in the first place. Your body hurts in quiet, reliable ways. The bad knee locks every morning. The shoulder that took a blow outside Crevant, or maybe it was Poitiers, throbs when it rains. One eye blurs after sunset. Your back crunches when you bend. You used to count these things like injuries. Now they're just geography, part of the landscape you carry around. A map of suffering, written in aches and scars. You used to wonder if it was worth it. Now you don't even bother asking the question. The answer hasn't changed. No one sings about you. There are no ballads for nameless men who held a pike and died in a ditch or lived long enough to wish they hadn't. The bards sing of knights and banners, of glorious last stands and noble victories. None of them mention the lice or the pus or the men who screamed for their mothers in languages no one could translate. Your story doesn't fit in rhyme or metre. It barely fits in memory. You've never seen your name on a list, not the pay records, not the truce agreements, not the war memorials in the towns that still care about the past. You weren't a citizen. You weren't even really a soldier, just a blade for hire, wrapped in tartan and desperation, traded like coin between men who already had too much. If they ever wrote your name down, they spelled it wrong. More likely, they didn't bother. And who can blame them? Your bones won't be buried under a marked stone. When your body finally gives out, and it will probably soon, no one will notice. If you're lucky, you'll die in your sleep beneath a roof that keeps the rain off. If not, you'll collapse in a field or gutter and be found by a farmer who thinks you are just another beggar. They'll dig a shallow grave or roll you into a pit and cover you with whatever earth is loose. Years later, if anyone finds your skeleton, they'll assume you were a peasant. Not a mercenary, not a soldier, just a poor man who starved. You think of Scotland sometimes, but it's not homesickness. Not really. You don't miss it so much as you wonder if it ever missed you. There's no one waiting. No fires kept lit. No sisters hanging onto your name or mothers whispering prayers for your return. You were one mouth too many back then. A burden, a fighter, someone else's problem. You left because there was nothing else to do, and no one ever sent word asking you to come back. You imagine walking into your old village and finding no one who knows your face. No one who remembers. No one who cares. You're not even a ghost there. You're nothing. Sometimes, when you find a patch of sun or a breeze that doesn't stink of human rot, you sit still and try to remember who you were before the war. Before the mud and the fire and the cold, but all you can picture is a boy with ribs like fence slats and hands that shook when he took the coin. A boy who didn't know what it meant, who thought war was a path, not a pit, who thought the worst thing that could happen was dying. Now you know better. Now you lie on your back in a ditch beside a half-collapsed wall, staring up at a sky that doesn't remember your name. You don't know what year it is. You don't care. Your legs are numb? Your stomach gave up growling days ago. You smell like wet wool and rot, and you're too tired to move. You watch a bird, some speckled thing, hop across the stones, eyeing your boots like it knows it has time. It does. You were here, for years, for battles, for blood and cold and betrayal, and it didn't matter. It never did. That brings us to the end of tonight's story, mud-choked, half-forgotten, and quietly erased beneath a foreign sky. If you're still listening, thank you for staying with me through the frostbite, famine, and futility, for giving even a breath of attention to a life history chose not to record. If you'd like early access to more of these quietly unravelling histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Amanda Lampke. Sleep well.